So let me start about critical thinking. All right, so here's a famous thinker, and the name of this sculpture by Rodin is called The Thinker. If you have ever happened to find yourself in Paris, there's a whole museum, the Rodin Museum, excellent museum, and essentially this statue exemplifies that sitting on top of your shoulders is one of the finest computers on the earth, but like any other muscle in your body, it needs to be exercised to work, in order to work itself the best, and that exercise is called thinking. All right. Now, I'm going to say something that may seem ambiguous. It is readily available. Like what you know already is readily available. However, thinking is scarce. Thinking is about acquiring new knowledge, looking at things differently than it. Right? So this whole concept of thinking is really scarce. I like to tell people the trajectory of my career has been in college. I tell people I learned how to think when I went to college and I studied engineering, problem solving, okay? And then I tell people I went to medical school and had a slight regression in my thinking. And then I started to study philosophy again and recaptured my thinking processes. But that's just a short story of my thinking. So we're going to right away do an exercise that I borrow from a faculty member in our diploma program in Myanmar, Professor Chit So, and which I thought was actually a good exercise. So I'm right away going to put you into a breakout room, okay, for about 5-6 minutes, all right? And I want you to give some examples of what's called positive thinking, and give a definition or some examples of critical thinking, and then give some thoughts on what you think lateral or creative thinking is. Okay? So I'm going to put you at random into 4 breakout rooms. I love this concept of assigning automatically. So really about 5-7 minutes. Okay? All right, so I'm going to have you start thinking right away. All right, here we go. Most of us should be back, if not all of us. So, well, I have 3 types of thinking, and I have 4 groups. Not planned out too well. I should have thought of another type of thinking, but there is another type of thinking. But who wants to start? Well, group, for the lack of a better phrase, group 1. What were your thoughts about positive thinking?
I don't remember the number of our group.
Okay, well, any group then.
Okay, we agreed that for positive thinking, it's optimistic thinking or seeing the bright side of any situation. Emotionally driven thinking.
Okay, good. Another group. You have anything to add to that? positive thinking? Or does any group have anything to add to that?
Yes, our group distinguished it from wishful thinking and saying that it needs to be based in some evidence, but it's reframing the issue to look at opportunities rather than just the problems and challenges.
That positive thinking, wishful thinking. Okay, all right, good.
One thing that came up in our group, Henry, is just for folks who might not know this, that there is a book called The Power of Positive Thinking, a practical guide to mastering the problems of everyday living, that was published, and Jeanette reminded me that it was Norman Vincent Peale who published it in 1952, and it's a big self-help book. So this is associated a lot with self-help kind of stuff, the idea that you can, if you change your thinking to positive in a positive way, that you can affect your actions.
Did the book conclude that one could actually be successful in having a better life with positive thinking?
That's, I think, the claim that Peale makes. And
the claim.
I'm not sure if he has evidence for that, Henry. I don't think the self-help industry goes by sheer assumption.
Let's put that word claim on the back burner for now, because we're going to use that word to claim. Okay, and what's the evidence for that claim? Because, well, let me just say it right now. There are no shortages of claims. Okay, and well, particularly in the U.S., if you bother to follow our news, there's been a lot of claims about our recent election. Okay, the question is, what's the evidence for that claim? Well, I'm not surprised that book was written in the early 1950s, 1952. When you think about it, it was right after the war, and people had to start living happy lives. The 1950s was a very good period in U.S. history, and then came along the 60s. But anyway, enough about that. Okay, good thoughts about positive thinking. What about critical thinking?
For critical thinking, solving problem attempts or solving problem thinking. It's logical, sequential thinking. It also includes deep reflections, deductive reasoning to generate ideas towards problem solving.
How are you using that word, inductive reasoning? What do you mean by that?
Usually deductive, it's about making generalizing deductive reasonings, generalizing from observations to generalizing ideas. Usually deductive thinking is about that.
Okay, all right, good. Well, we're going to say a few words about inductive and deductive reasoning, okay? As a prelude to further discussions about the different types of critical thinking. All right, any other thoughts about critical thinking?
We discussed, there are always, for critical thinking, we are always comparing our ideas with some evidences which are already available. We are giving them logic based on the evidences.
Based on the evidences, okay. And we're going to talk a lot about there are different types of evidence, or there's different ways to support what we're going to call an argument or a claim. Okay. All right, good. Anything else to add to that?
In our group, we talked about explaining why you're pursuing a topic in your research, and often you have to explain to someone who might say, who cares about it? So you're trying to explain an opposing point of view. Who could possibly oppose your research and what you're doing?
Why are you explaining an opposing point of view?
Because often, like when I was going through my PhD process, I was often asked, well, why do we care about this topic? So I needed to be able to explain my point of view from the position of someone else to justify my own aims and why I'm pursuing it and why it matters.
Okay, all right. I think I might venture to say that's another type of thinking, persuasive thinking, as opposed to, well, a different form of critical thinking. You're not analyzing a claim, you're more like persuading. So, which is another type of thinking. I like to say there's 3 ways that you could convince somebody of your point of view. One could use persuasion, which is ethical, or one could manipulate, like change the facts, which is obviously not ethical, or one could coerce somebody into your way of thinking. Persuasion is when you try to get the other person to, in an ethical way, believe in your way of looking at things. But
yeah, that's true. That's a good point. I guess it's sort of turning inward, not really convincing someone else, but checking your own research.
I'm not sure if I understand what you mean, checking your own research.
Right. So in answering the why question, it forces me to take a closer look at my topic and why I'm even doing the research and why it matters.
Yeah, now that's a good point. If after trying to persuade someone, you find yourself not being convinced, then and sometimes that happens as well. Okay, so what about this thing about lateral thinking, creative thinking? What is meant by that?
How about creative ways for problems?
Oh, wait, one person at a time. Emmanuel, we're having problems with your iPhone. There is a way to mute your iPhone. Anyway, who was talking?
Yeah, creative ways for solving problems.
Well, don't define something by using the same word.
Well, we define it. We define it like, a creative thinking doesn't have any boundaries. I mean, whether you're right or wrong, you can go to any limit, to have your creativity, whatever you want to do with your life and everything. There are no boundaries for creative thinking.
Now, what do you mean by there's no boundaries?
Sorry?
What do you mean by no boundaries?
Basically, we were comparing critical thinking with creative thinking. So we thought, for, critical thinking, you want to have evidences. You compare it with something which is already existing and you are arguing about that. For creative thinking, it doesn't need to have something which is already existing. You can give birth to anything, whatever you want. Like, if you want to say, I want to jump out of this building without harming myself, and then you can create ideas, how to do it, and at the end of the day you can do it regardless of the evidences. So that's called creative thinking.
Okay, well, I'm not sure if that's called creative thinking or destructive thinking when you start talking about jumping out of buildings. Other thoughts?
Or we can say,
you can go ahead.
okay, we can say that during the analysis, we have to give a direction to our result. We have to decide which tables are more representable, which data, which graphs are more representable, which describes our data very in an attractive way. So it can be a creative thinking.
Okay, other thoughts?
I think creative thinking is more about intuitive thinking. Sometimes we can find a solution for a problem without knowing how we did it, without going through a logical step-by-step process, I think.
Okay, all right, that's getting closer. Using other ways of thinking rather than traditional logical thinking, creating new pathways. Sometimes we call it thinking out of the box. And someone mentioned about boundaries, so extend out of the boundaries of traditional thinking, logical thinking. So I'll say more about that in just a few minutes. All right, good. So good thoughts about all these different types of thinking. Positive thinking, as you said, a mental, emotional attitude that focuses on the bright side of life, and we expect positive results. We anticipate happiness, health, success, and believe that he or she can overcome any obstacle and difficulty, which is okay to have. Okay, it's good to have a positive spin on life rather than a negative spin on life. For example, I'll never get it done, as opposed to I see this as an opportunity to learn something new. It's too complicated versus a positive thinking. I'll tackle it from a different angle. I don't have the resources. Necessity is the mother of invention. There's not enough time. Well, let's evaluate some priorities. Okay, so that's positive thinking is good. So you want to manage your self-talk or your talk about negative thinking, and if you think you can or you think you can't, you're right, but you want to think mainly that you think you could do it. This is going to be a wonderful day, all right, as opposed to this is going to be a crappy day. So positive thinking is good, but again, not always realistic or necessarily attainable, and sometimes it could be delusional if taken too far. So that's just to compare. That's positive thinking.
Can I add something to positive thinking, Henry?
Yeah.
Just because I know all of you work in the healthcare field. I think positive thinking for folks who have mental health disorders and issues can also be a very tricky situation, right? So there are some biochemical irregularities or medications that people take that might really make folks it makes it difficult for some folks to really engage in critical thinking, in positive thinking. So just want to put that out there, that there's a mental health aspect to this idea of like you can always change your internal self-talk.
Well, I'm glad you brought up the issue about mental health, or more broadly healthcare. A particular issue in healthcare is the issue of hope in dying patients. Do you take away hope, or what does it mean to have hope when you're at the end of life? And there's been a lot of discussions, particularly, I mean, I deal with a lot of ethical issues in patient care, and frequently comes up the notion of how do you tell a person that they're going to die shortly, and is that taking away hope? And so that's a particular issue in healthcare, the issue about hope. So thanks for bringing that up. So in terms of critical thinking, what are the characteristics of critical thinking, and when is it, or more importantly, why is it important to think critically? Why is it important to think critically? Why do we need to know how to think critically? What's the advantages of it?
I think we have to think critically when we have resources, our rare resources, to think about best utilization of our resource and best use these resources to solve our problem, depending on also cost-benefit analysis.
Okay, other thoughts?
Yeah, life is sophisticated, and it's not, and also human beings in interaction and everything. That's why we need critical thinking, alternative ways.
What do you mean by that, interaction with human beings?
Communication, daily life problems we're facing.
But how does critical thinking enhances interactions, communications in daily life?
Yeah. It's not always. We don't live an idealistic life. It's a lot of issues are coming around us, and we need to think to find alternatives, how to solve this problem and how to manage these problems or issues.
Okay, how to manage problems. Okay, other thoughts as to why?
I believe.
Okay, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
And also, we are different.
I think that this critical thinking is the basis of scientific thinking. So we cannot achieve scientific scientific achievements if we do not have critical thinking, I think.
Okay. All right, good. So right, critical thinking is related to thinking in research. I'll say more about that in a few minutes, but in daily life, why is it important to have critical thinking outside of the research environment? Why is it an important tool?
I think so that we can have the better decision. A critical to think critically, we also need the knowledge, knowing the good things and bad things for as a consequences of our decision. By thinking critically, I think we can have a better decision.
Okay, all right, good. Yeah, better decisions. All right, so essentially, why think critically? Well, thinking is filled with, unfortunately, biases. All right, when we're talking to other people, prejudices, mistakes in reasoning, unexamined social rules that should be examined for truth and validity. We talked about just because a practice has been done historically doesn't make it correct. And we have to examine unexamined practices, unexamined claims, and in order to know better about what we're doing and why we're doing. So there's a lot of mistakes in thinking, and we want to uncover unexamined truths. Let me see if I have, so uncritical thinkers pretend they know more than they do, get annoyed by problems, are impatient, judge on first impressions and intuition, focus on their own opinions, look only for ideas like their own, guided by feelings rather than critical thinking or thoughts, and claim that thinking gives them a headache. Just don't think about it. Just sign it. I challenge you to when you read the newspapers, and especially the editorial pages or the op-ed pages, and people give their point of view, and examine what is being written and try to pick out the flaws in the thinking of what is being written, because there's a lot of uncritical analysis or uncritical claims that are being made, and you have to be able to pick out the false claims, and this is why we want to evaluate arguments. Also, let me jump ahead and say this is why when you read the discussion section of a manuscript, you want to make sure that any claims being made based on the data is really the result of good thinking, good inductive reasoning from those results, because too often the conclusions are not justified by the results. And so you have to be able to pick that apart. Again, critical thinking versus positive thinking, critical thinking highlights the weaknesses, focuses on probability. Positive thinking focuses on possibility, and critical thinking is more objective as opposed to being subjective. So, again, the benefits of critical thinking: becoming aware of different approaches to a problem, appreciation of different worldviews, challenging one's own beliefs and assumptions, and taking decisions on an analytical and considered basis. Now, we mentioned about research. Critical thinking skills look like research, essentially the whole research process. We observe, we interpret data, we analyze data, we infer conclusions from statistical results of our data. Again, the data doesn't necessarily prove anything, doesn't establish the truth beyond approach, meaning that, I mean, the best we could do is get closer to the truth with the data. Think about this, right? Data are considered significance if it's less than a p-value of 0.05, right? That doesn't establish conclusively the truth. It only tells you how much uncertainty are we willing to accept in our data to form a conclusion. Okay, so it doesn't establish the proof beyond other possibilities. And I may also pose the question, think about it, why was a probability level of 0.05 chosen? And we don't have to discuss the answer now, but essentially that's an ethical issue as to why one accepts a level of uncertainty of 0.05, and that's why science is not considered value-free. It's still based on values as well.
Henry, can I add something? Do you mind?
Yes.
So you early, and actually it's based on a chat conversation that's going on, and I think Erfan and Ndikum have been exchanging some ideas. It's about objectivity, right? And so you mentioned, and I love the way you just phrased that now about like we can't prove things, and it's about making conclusions based on data, and there's always a probability level of uncertainty. And I think we need to also think about the idea that total objectivity is, I would say, an illusion, and I think that we owe it to ourselves and to the world to really complicate our understanding of objectivity. Maybe that we try to achieve to be as objective as possible, but there, it's really not. I don't think it's possible to be 100% objective. But so I was just, I just wanted to complicate that notion a little bit.
Right. Yeah. No. Exactly right. We're trying to get as close as possible to the truth. There's an interesting book entitled "The Truth About the Truth." Okay, very interesting book. Again, core critical thinking skills and research, analysis, inference, which is inductive thinking, evaluation, explanation, interpretation. So these are all critical thinking skills as we try to get closer to the truth. The more and more I've performed clinical trials and realize, if I could use this phrase, the basis of clinical trials is really built on a house of cards, meaning that it's not too sturdy. Okay, results from clinical trials. So creative thinking or lateral thinking was coined by Edward de de Bono, if I'm saying that correctly, denotes a problem-solving style that involves looking at a given
بس يا رضا معلش قولي لها ان انت ما كنتش مركزه عشان كنت في الوحده فما شفتيش السكرين شوت صح. دلوقتي عايزه البري ليه؟ البري ملوش لازمه، احنا هنا مستشيرين بالاستادي دي علشان نقول البرسنتج اوف ادفيرس ايفنت مع الريم سي، وبالتالي ما فيش حاجه اسمها بري في الادفيرس ايفنت. طب مثلا مش كانوا حاسبينها كام وبعد السويتش بقت كام؟ فاهم قصدي؟ فالمعلومه دي اصلا مش موجوده، مش منطقيه تكون موجوده.
All right, enough of that. Okay. So, situation from different or unexpected angles. Sometimes a problem seems difficult or insoluble because our assumptions about it are wrong. Essentially, lateral thinking considers alternative possibilities from different perspectives, again, out of the box thinking. And sometimes in order to do lateral thinking, we have to de-learn how we think traditionally and relearn. A excellent recent book that really exemplifies this de-learning, relearning example is a book published just a few months ago, Think Again by Adam Grant. It's a really a wonderful book about how we have to examine our previous way of traditional thinking and essentially examine our predetermined assumptions about how we think. And we have to, in order to get ahead and make progress, we have to think again or de-learn how we have thought about before. I'll say more about this throughout the whole year about thinking again. So lateral thinking is a search for alternatives, look to get away from traditional patterns, ignores logical direction. It's an attitude of the mind. It's low probability thinking, meaning you want to take chances. Okay. And methods of lateral thinking: brainstorming, debate, discussion, conversation, sharing ideas. In fact, this sharing of ideas, I was just reading recently about the disadvantages of remote working, because remote working doesn't gather people together to brainstorm. I mean, you could brainstorm on Zoom, but it's not the same as being in person, face to face, and in order to advance thinking. And that's why managers and employers are really wanting to get people to have some face-to-face interaction. Sometimes, where and when do ideas come up? And it isn't necessarily, okay, we're going to have a Zoom conference and think about new ideas. New ideas could come up at any point during the day. You can't predict when new ideas come up. And so I really do believe in this concept of face-to-face interaction. And so lateral thinking, use of chance, search for different ways of looking at things. Visually, lateral thinking, this is the traditional way of looking at a problem, and lateral thinking is going around the traditional approach. Or here's traditional thinking from getting A to B. Oh, well, I have to go through this maze here to get to B. Well, maybe we could just go around, okay? A different way of looking at things. So some lateral thinking puzzles. Okay, this is a classic example. A father and his son are involved in a car accident, as a result of which the son is very badly injured, and his father rushed to the hospital for emergency surgery. However, the surgeon takes one look at the boy and says, "I cannot operate on him." When asked why, the surgeon replies, "Because he's my son." How could this be the case? Are there two fathers? How could this be the case?
The father was the surgeon and he took him to the hospital.
The mother.
What's that?
The surgeon is the mother.
Yes,
But
right.
it's the mother.
It's the mother, okay?
Why do you think that? Why do you think that the surgeon must be a man all the time?
That's right. That's the traditional way of thinking, that all surgeons are men. Okay, very good.
I'd also like to complicate that further, Henry, because in the United States, we do have same-sex couples and we do allow marriage between a man and a woman and a woman. So technically, somebody can have two fathers.
Okay, all right. Well, that's further down the road of non-traditional thinking. Okay, thank you for that. All right, very good, excellent. See, thinking out of the box. Okay, all right. I'll have to add that to the answer for my next presentation. Could you solve this puzzle? There are 6 eggs in the basket. 6 people each take 1 egg. How could it be that 1 egg is left in the basket after everybody takes 1 egg? What happens here?
The last one will take the egg in the basket.
Right, that's right. The last one, she takes the basket as well as the last egg that's in it as well. Okay, very good. This one, it's hard to read, so let me just skip that. All right. So, all right. So you have 6 glasses. 3 are filled. 3 of the glasses are filled with orange juice, and the other 3 are empty. By moving only 1 glass, okay, can you arrange them so that the full and empty glasses alternate? Just by moving 1 glass.
We can pour the second glass juice into the 5th one.
So pour the second one into the 5th one. Take the second glass and pour it into the 5th. Okay, excellent, very good. All right, you all are demonstrating good creative lateral thinking. Okay, now the brain is not intended for lateral thinking. We like to stick to our patterns, and so to become creative, we need to block out the normal channels or de-learn how we have learned and cut across patterns and into self-organized information systems. Okay, so lateral thinking, don't choose, but change. Don't look for what is right, look for what is different. Don't follow a sequence, make deliberate jumps. Don't concentrate on relevance. Welcome chance intrusions. Don't accept the obvious. Explore less likely directions. Okay, for creative, different ways of thinking. Okay, all right, up. Let's, okay, so let me end by saying creative thinking is intelligence having fun. Albert Einstein. Okay, think about it that way. Okay, so now that we talked about thinking in general, so we have to now get into the details about evaluating or analyzing arguments, or how do we establish the probability of a claim? And so we have to look at the anatomy of an argument. And I have another slide for this, but let me just say right now, when I talk about an argument, I'm not talking about when you and I disagree and we're yelling at each other and we're having an argument. An argument is the basis of a claim. So what is a claim, and what's the basis of a claim? So what I mean by a claim, Isabel, I'm having a blank moment. When you brought up the claim, say
Sure.
it again.
So I think, so when I talked about the power of positive thinking, right, that book, and one of the things that the author suggests is, using positive affirmations to change your thinking. And so the author claims that that kind of positive affirmation, that self-talk, will make a difference in your actions, but does not provide any evidence. And so a claim, everybody can claim something, but it's a statement unsupported by evidence, right?
Well, a claim could be supported by evidence. The question is, what is the strength of the
Good point,
evidence
yes.
of the claim? Okay, so frequently in my business, I'm always hearing people say, that's not ethical. And one is using that word as a substitute for evidence of that claim. That's not ethical. And then I ask people, well, how did you come to that conclusion? Or people will say, that's not correct. In essence, someone is stating a conclusion without giving any supporting evidence for that claim. The other thing I was going to say, somewhat similar to that is that when I hear someone say words like, this is clearly the case. This is definitely correct. When I hear absolute words like definite, clearly, I know the person doesn't know what he or she is talking about, because they're using the word clearly, definite, absolute as a substitute for evidence. And I call people when they, what I mean is that I challenge people to tell me what's the evidence of their making a claim. Anybody could claim anything. The question is, what is the basis? What is the basis of that claim? And that's, so what is an argument? We produce an argument when we give a reason for thinking that a claim is true, or why we think it approximates the truth. Now, I'll say right now, deductive reasoning is supports the truth, whereas inductive reasoning, deductive reasoning will establish a truth, whereas inductive reasoning could only support the truth. And we have to evaluate the strength of that support. So an argument consists of two parts. One part is the premise or the premises that supposedly provide the reason for thinking that the other part or the claim is true. Now, premises themselves need to be true themselves or approximate the truth and be relevant to the claim. So what do I mean by that? So is this an argument? Sam says to his instructor, my grandmother died and I had to miss class to attend the funeral. I should be excused for missing class. What's the claim here?
It's a claim, an argument that follows that is followed by a premise of my mother this, and then in conclusion, I should be excused. So there's an argument, there's a premise, and there's a conclusion.
Well, what's the conclusion?
I should be excused from missing class.
Okay, right. So that's the claim. I should be excused. And what are the premises?
My grandmother died.
Okay, that's one premise. My grandmother died, that's relevant to the claim. And the other premise is what?
I had to miss class to attend the funeral.
Okay, right. So now, this in and of itself is a claim as well. Right? I had to attend the funeral. Now, which is okay. Sometimes, I mean, premises themselves are claims. But this claim is supporting this claim, which is fine. I mean, premises also have to have a certain truth value to it as well. So now one could say, what's the basis of this claim? I had to attend the funeral.
Should I talk?
Anybody could talk. You could talk, Emmanuel.
So the basis is my grandmother died, which is supporting the claim of I have to attend the funeral.
Okay, other thoughts about that? You're saying my grandmother died. That supports the claim I had to attend the funeral?
Yes, sir.
I think the family link between the person and the died person, this is what supports this claim. Because it is usually accepted that a person attend his or her grandmother or grandfather funeral.
Okay, it's let me take it one step further. It could be considered as a cultural practice that one attends the funeral of a close relative, a grandmother. Okay, now if it was, well, my fifth cousin died and I had to attend the funeral, would be somewhat of a weaker evidence for attending the funeral. Okay, a friend of a friend died, and therefore I had to attend the funeral. Well, I'm not so sure whether that would support the claim I had to be excused for missing class. So again, it depends on the evidence for supporting this claim, which in turn supports this claim. I should be excused for missing class, and if the professor is reasonable, he or she will accept that claim for being excused for missing class. So here, in this one here, is this an argument? Are there any claims here?
Okay, the claim to keep close watch on who has access to such information.
I'm sorry? What's the claim?
To keep close watch on who has access to such information.
I'm talking about this. Which sentence are you looking at?
The last one, I think, is the one that she mentioned, right, Asma?
Yes.
Is that a claim?
The reminder of the police department.
Well, is that a claim?
I think a claim is the first sentence. Identity theft is up at least tenfold over last year.
Is that a claim or just a fact?
It is a fact.
I thought it was a claim because there wasn't any evidence given to support it. That's what I
Well,
was.
if you ask for evidence, you could, I mean, look at the data. But it's more of a fact. Well, compare it to this sentence, this paragraph.
So Henry, would you say in that second example there, is the likely the indicator that you're making an argument rather than a claim? Or are you making a claim rather than stating a fact? Sorry, I'm mixing up things.
Yeah, right. Yeah, so you're making it's like almost like predictive. You're likely to become a victim. That's a claim, and it's supported by this premise.
And it's a conclusion because he said, so you are now more likely to.
Right, so you're wise to look at the word so, and there's other words we'll look at that gives you hints as to which statements are claims and which statements are premises. So again, I mean, this may look like a claim, but it actually is a fact. Now, this is not a fact, right? Isabel, you're wise to pick up on the word likely. So
language is my thing, right?
Yes, right, exactly. That's why scientific writing and critical thinking goes hand in hand. Okay, so an argument consists of two parts, one of which the premise or the premises demonstrates or supports the other part, the conclusion. Demonstrates would be more deductive reasoning, supports is inductive reasoning, and I'll go over that in just a second. Let me, interest of time, well, what is a statement? Well, in the interest of time, this is too busy. So again, Sally and Bob are having an argument. That's in layman's terms. Sally says, abortion is morally wrong, and those who think otherwise are seeking to justify murder. Okay, that's not an argument in the sense of Sally's making a claim, but it's not supporting that claim. It's just making a statement that essentially, well, abortion is morally wrong, and essentially it's murdering someone. But Sally doesn't give yet still a reason is why she thinks abortion is morally wrong, and Bob joins in the argument and says it's not morally wrong, and those who think so are right-wing bigots who are seeking to impose their narrow-minded views on all of the rest of us. So this is faulty reasoning, and again, we have to be able to sort out when someone is justifying their claims. So Bob is making a claim, but this type of language doesn't justify Bob's point of view. So here we have Sally saying abortion is morally wrong because it is wrong to take the life of an innocent human being, and a fetus is an innocent human being. So now we have Sally is now giving an argument, and she's giving us a reason for thinking that abortion is morally wrong. And the conclusion of the argument is the first four words, abortion, that's the conclusion, is morally wrong. And she gives several premises, taking the life of it's wrong to take the life of an innocent human being. That's one premise, okay? Or one could also call that a claim. And the other premise, a fetus is an innocent human being. Now, that's another premise. It's also a claim. And one could now question the validity of this claim or the premise itself. So Sally's point of view is based on two premises, and she is assuming that these premises approximates the truth. Now, one could now dissect Sally's argument and say, okay, I hear your argument. However, your argument, someone could question whether Sally's thinking is correct by saying, well, that's a claim. How do you support that claim? And that really is the basis of a lot of abortion arguments.
Excuse me, Prof.
Whether,
Excuse me, Prof.
whether, let me finish my thought, whether the fetus is a human being or not. And if you look at all the different religions, that is really a major difference between the different religions, and when does the fetus become a human being. Christian theology looks at the point of conception, whereas Jewish and Muslim religions look at when the fetus obtains a soul. I'm sorry, who wanted to talk?
Excuse me, Prof. Can you explain further on the deductive reasoning and inductive reasoning?
Yes, I'll do that in a little while.
Henry, there's a question
Sure,
from
sure.
Jeanette
Okay.
in the chat. I know she has connection problems, so she might not be able to ask the question about premises and helping identifying the premises. Emmanuel posted an answer, but if you want to take a look at it and maybe say something again before you move on.
Okay,
about the
we're
premises?
going to have an exercise about premises.
Perfect.
Okay.
Thanks, Emmanuel.
Okay. All right. So let me. So again, premises, conclusion, premises, indicators, since, because, for, given that, seeing that, for the reason that is shown by the fact, whereas conclusion indicators, there's Emmanuel, so, okay, therefore, hence, thus, implies, consequently, it follows that we may conclude, okay? So this is how you separate out premises and conclusion. Again, premises themselves could be claims, like the fetus is a human being. So which one of these are arguments? Arguments versus explanations. Explain. So my toe hurts because I stubbed it.
Prof, excuse me, I'm just getting back some connection. With respect to the previous slide, how does one distinguish between the facts and the premises? So I'm still stuck back on the case studies that we did earlier. How does one distinguish between facts and the premise, or is it the same?
Well, I think
yeah, this one.
Yeah, right. Well, that is when you're dealing with arguments, you're trying to establish a truth based on, I mean, if you, if I have 3 objects on the table and I say there are 3 objects on the table, I'm not dealing with trying to analyze something. I see 3 objects on the table, so I really don't have to engage in critical thinking or argument. If that is
okay, got that.
Okay, it's though actually some people may disagree whether an object is on a table or not. Okay, but we won't go there. Okay, I mean it is what it is. 3 things on a table is a fact. I don't have to argue that. I don't have to analyze that. So here, identity theft is up at least tenfold. Okay, that's not part of an argument. It is a fact. So here, my toe hurts. Okay, because I stubbed it. So is that an argument or an explanation?
To me, I think it's an explanation.
Yes.
Right. Yeah. So I mean, one could say that's a claim. My toe hurts, but the whole sentence is not an argument. It's because I stubbed it. That's an explanation as to why the toe hurts. It's not part of an argument. It's not. The sentence itself is not an argument. It's an explanation. Okay. What about the second one?
That's a bit tricky. Sounds like an argument, but
No.
I don't see a conclusion there. There's a fire in there because it's an explanation.
But it's not an
Yes.
argument.
It's the argument.
Yeah, it's a bit tricky. It's a thin line, but I will go for an explanation because you're trying to give a reason for the fire.
Well,
So
the
is an
conclusion is there's a fire in there, right?
Yes.
Ah, okay.
Sorry, may I say something, Prof? I think it's an argument in the sense that there is a claim that there is a fire, but the supporting statement as to the basis of the claim is not very clear, because even the smoke is still a claim. Sorry. Okay, I'm lost. Sorry.
But could there be another reason why there's a fire, right?
Yeah.
No, we don't know. I mean, smoke might be one possible explanation. So, but it's not the only one. So I wonder if that's more of an argument because you're making an assumption.
Exactly.
Yes, the smoke is not the evidence of having fire.
Well, but it does support it.
Some sort of.
It may not
we say
be
that, though, where
totally
there's smoke, there's
supporting
fire.
it. Again, the issue is how strong is the supporting evidence. Now, you're right, just because there's smoke out there doesn't necessarily establish the truth of the association. Okay? There could be different reasons, and we'll go through this in future presentations about evaluating the strength of an argument or the claim. So here's the conclusion. There's a fire in there, okay? And that claim, I mean, I'm not in the building, thank God, okay? However, I see smoke out there, so there must be a fire in there. So this is the premise. I see smoke out there. My claim, there's a fire in there, and I'm not going in the building, okay? What about this one here? She won the lottery because she is lucky.
How about the one before it? The price of oil went up last week.
You want to talk about that? Okay.
Yeah, it looks
I'll
like
have you give the rest of the presentation. All right.
It's
All right. So what about this one?
Explanation again. Yes.
Yeah.
What's that?
Explanation.
It could be an
Price of
argument.
Oil went up last week because OPEC cut back on supply.
It could be argument because it's supporting the cutting back the supply. Could be an argument.
Because
it could be an argument. If we go with the second one, it could be an argument. Because the conclusion is the price went up last week.
Well, that is the conclusion, but is this a premise or an explanation?
A premise.
Explanation, it's fact. OPEC cut back on supply.
No, it's actually an explanation because it's a
An
fact.
explanation, just like this one here.
It's an explanation, yeah.
But couldn't there be other reasons why the price of oil went up, right? I mean, it's a complex. I mean, I'm just saying that I think it's, I mean, and then you could even go as far, because now I'm going on the rabbit hole, like even the first sentence, my toe hurts because I stubbed it. Well, maybe the toe hurts because it was broken before it stubbed, right? So, or there is a disease underlying. So I'm wondering.
Well, you're just saying this could be, well, the fact of the matter is he stubbed it. We know that, that's a fact. And that explains why the toe hurts.
You know, if we go with the argument of multiple reasons, we may be having a slippery slope because there will always be multiple reasons in most situations. But when the reason is stated as a fact, it becomes a different thing. Like, because I stopped it, it's a fact. Because OPEC cut down on supply, it's a fact. So I would say it's an argument.
You would say it's an argument. I thought you were going to say it's an explanation.
Mm-hmm.
Well, here, let's look at the last one here.
Doctor, can I?
Let's look at the last one here.
Yes.
Really do need a root canal.
It's an explanation.
It's a thin line.
Mm-hmm.
This is the claim. Now, it's not explaining why you need a root canal, as like in here. Someone is making a claim. You need a root canal. I told her it's not a claim. It is what it is. Here, I'm making a claim. You need a root canal. And the premise is, well, you could have an acute tooth abscess.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, just look at the difference between these two things and appreciate the difference.
Between which two, Henry? The first and the last one?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Why is
We
you
have no evidence of the tooth abscess.
I was just about to ask, why is you have an acute tooth abscess not a fact? Why is it a premise?
Well, it is
What
a
if I rephrase that sentence like this, and maybe we see it differently? I put my premise first and then my conclusion, and I say, because you have a tooth, an acute tooth abscess, so you really need a root canal. Would that be an argument then?
Well, yeah, no, this is an argument. This is
It's
the
an
claim.
argument.
I'm claiming you need a root canal.
Yeah.
Okay, because you have an acute tooth abscess. This is the premise. Again, a premise itself could be a claim or could be a fact that supports a claim.
Henry, can I add something here? Because I think it relates to a larger conversation we're going to be having around audience and context later on. Can I add something, or can it? Is it a good time?
Yes.
So, every time I do exercises like this and whatever, I get down the rabbit hole at the point like, well, what is really, like the example you gave earlier, there's 3 objects on the table. Well, you can start arguing about what is a table. Is it really a table? Who thinks it's a table? What is important, I think, with all of these, and this is why these exercises sometimes can be so tricky and so complex, Emmanuel, you mentioned this, and the line can be so thin, is because we don't know the context of these statements, right? And so when you think about it in the context of your writing, you're writing for particular audiences. So let's say, like the third example, I think is a good one with the OPEC cut down and the price of oil. Let's say you're writing to an audience that's deeply familiar with the economics of oil prices and what affects oil prices. This can much more easily become an argument than a fact. Whereas maybe it's established that the main reason why oil prices go up has to do with OPEC's price manipulations, right, or supply manipulations. So what I'm trying to say is the determination if something is a premise and leads to an argument or it's a fact can often lie within the larger context of what you're writing about, and that is determined often by whom you're writing to, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, no, I understand and appreciate what you're saying. And that's why I think that, there are different extent of clarity. So I think, again, if we concentrate on this one, and even this one here, I think it's I think this is a good example of an argument. One is proposing that, claiming there's a fire in there, That's not a fact. One is making an assumption, claiming, and the premise is the smoke out here. Now, as you said, that's not necessarily true just because there's smoke out there. But again, that goes with the how strong is the argument? Or how strong is the argument? And it could be other ways to explain why you have smoke out here. But that gets into evaluating the strength of an argument, which we'll get into, not today, okay? There's just too much stuff to talk about critical thinking to get into that today. I'm just trying to make you want to come back.
Can I add one quick thing, something that Emmanuel said? Emmanuel, I heard you, I like the switching around, right? You have an acute tooth abscess, therefore, as a result, and you use the term, the term so, like you have an acute abscess, so you really do need a root canal. From a writing perspective and a language perspective, I'd be careful using so in formal academic writing because it's very weak. So as a result, therefore, thus, and so on. I just, so want to point this out there. I've heard you say that, and I've seen this in some folks' writing. I would recommend using a stronger wording than so in formal writing.
Yeah. Thank you for that.
Okay. So I think here's another example. This is an explanation. And this is an argument, the claim is that he should have had medical insurance, and the premise is, well, he can't pay his bills now. That supports the claim that he should have medical insurance, whereas this is just, again, an explanation. So why don't we do this? All right, so I attached the file to the chat box. I'm going to put you in breakout rooms. Why don't you discuss as much as possible in 10 minutes, which are arguments. Okay, so download a few of you download this file in the chat box. Okay, and I'm going to put you into breakout rooms. Okay. Oh, I think it may be the same rooms as before, which is okay. I get a feeling you all get along. Okay. All right.
This was hard, Henry.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's barely 9 o'clock here in the morning. Why are you doing this to me?
On a Sunday.
After all, exactly.
Right. A Sunday, no less. We have to start. What I'm trying to say is
we need the model answer for the previous exercise.
Think more about
Yes,
our claims and think more about our analytical skills. I think sometimes we take it for granted. and I think this will help us not only in interpreting our research data and how our data, in what ways our data supports conclusions, because that's a major reasons for why your papers get rejected when you overstate your conclusions, or you don't state correctly your conclusions, or you don't think ahead as what your what kind of data you need to obtain to support your objectives. So you have good one may have good objectives, but if you don't pick the right study design to try to support your conclusions, you won't get published. So all this comes together. All, scientific writing, critical thinking, research design, analysis of data. This all goes in the same puzzle of trying to produce a product that gets accepted in a good journal.
Henry, Zainab asked a really good question at the end of our session. Zainab, could you repeat that question again about the verb or the term argument, or the verb argue, the noun argument?
Yes, because I tried to translate the word to my native language. Okay, so I find argument could be translated as a debate and could be translated as an evidence. So I'm asking from your point of view, what do you think argument is? Is debate something debatable, or?
Well, what's the word you're saying?
Argument.
Yeah.
It's debate or evidence.
Oh, debate. Evidence is part of an argument. The premises, and argument is more like a debate,
So when we receive it as an Arabic speaker, I receive argument as something that is not completely supported by an evidence. It's something still debatable.
Not necessarily. And I think that, so like the one example I think that we talked about last from the examples, Henry, was the one with the teething rings, right? And it was citing a study as evidence for its claim that teething rings can affect toddlers and babies, negatively in the plastic or whatever. And it was citing an animal-based study that allows some conclusions to potentially infer that the effect these teething rings had on animals in the study could also be the effect on children, right? And it brings up the issue, of course, you don't want to do a clinical study on something that can cause harm on babies and children. So, and I think in that case, you have evidence to support the claim. But I think that so just because you have evidence doesn't mean that whatever you're stating as, based on this evidence, we can say with some certainty that X causes Y. It doesn't mean that a year later, somebody might say, actually, X really doesn't cause Y. Something else also causes Y. So I think evidence doesn't mean that it's immutable and 100% true all the time. So there is always room for change, if that makes any sense, Zainab, to explain that. So I think argument, the verb to argue, is definitely a synonym for debating, and so every good academic or scientific argument can always be, debated, and should be debated. Wouldn't you agree, Henry?
Yes, right. Because we, except for in rare cases, we don't establish with absolute certainty the truth. If I could say that.
Thank you, Isabel, for the clarification.
And this gets into Hill's postulates. I don't know if we'll be talking about Hill's postulates later.
I hadn't planned to, but we could certainly talk about it, or you could talk about it. I welcome that. So let me, I thought I had this pulled up. Oh, there it is. Okay, good. So, so let's see how we did. Listen, there's so much to talk about this. Trust me. I hope I'm convincing you that this is a full agenda. Okay. All right, good. So the first one, which one is this? It's not, oh, I can't, for some reason I can't write on it. What's the first one? Argument or something else?
Explanation?
I'm sorry?
Explanation here?
I'm sorry, I'm not hearing that.
We thought it's an explanation.
An explanation.
Yes.
Okay, other thoughts?
I think we thought it was a little mixed in our group, right? So we thought that the nagging leg injury could be the explanation, but the second part, he just doesn't seem to have the drive he once had, is more of a premise and would lead to an argument.
Well, which is the claim?
That he's unlikely to win the US Open this year.
Right, he's unlikely to win. That's the claim. And what's the supporting evidence or premises? I mean,
His nagging leg injury.
Yeah, nagging leg injury plus he just doesn't seem to have the drive. I mean, Isabel, I know what you mean. A nagging leg injury could be more like a explanation, but the additional sentence is, I mean, the whole sentence is arguing for a certain claim. It's not like, my toe hurts. It's almost more like a fact, though one could also say that's a claim, but he stubbed it. It's more of an explanation. Okay. All right, good. I mean, yeah, there are fine differences between arguments, explanation, persuasion. So it's even all those categories are not distinct, but we're trying to get more. Let me say, if we understand when we're presented with a claim and an argument, then we're more likely to try to question it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Someone has a toe that hurts because he stubbed it. I don't think anyone's going to bother arguing against that. Okay. That's less of an argument and more of an explanation. Okay. What about the second one?
Okay. Sorry. So the first one is an argument? You're saying it's an argument?
More like an argument, right.
Mm-hmm.
The second one, or what's labeled for?
It looks like an opinion. There is no premises. There is no supporting evidences at all. It's an opinion.
Well, it's not an argument, an opinion. Yeah, it could be an opinion, but essentially, when it says there's not a bit of truth in that notion, that's I mean, that's in and of itself more like a claim that hasn't been supported yet itself. And I'm not sure if that's supportable as well. So it's more of a I mean, this is where you could tease it out and say one is using pejorative language, like he hasn't the laughing stock of the world. What a stupid idea. That's in no way an argument. It's using the word a stupid idea as to try to convince you that the president has not made us a laughing stock. That's a stupid idea. That's not an argument. And one could say, well, you haven't really said anything worthwhile. What about the next one? This may be easier.
Labeled it, I think it's an argument.
What's the claim?
The claim, the charge is little more than other dentists.
Better service.
Which one is the claim?
I give better service.
But it's a feeling.
No, I think I give better service is a premise. It justifies the claim. I think my billing practices are justified.
So we looked at that. It's a little bit a thin line between both, but we concluded it's an explanation because it's just trying to justify his opinion. Yeah, but there was no real clear conclusion here.
There's no conclusion?
I think my billing practices.
I thought you were going to use your method of the so.
Okay, yeah, I thought that's so actually there, but oh well.
That Isabel doesn't like.
That Isabel doesn't like. Yeah, my first thought actually when we discussed in group was that it was an argument because of that so, but then there was
don't be scared off by what Isabel said about the so. Okay, stick to your guns. I do agree. I don't see so in academic writing, but nonetheless, stick to your guns, Emmanuel.
Yeah.
I remember that when I was reading this. So, of Isabel.
So what?
Everybody now will think of me when you see so, whenever for the rest of your lives. Oh my goodness.
Exactly.
I want everyone to listen to when Isabel gives her presentations. She uses the word so.
All the time.
All the time.
That's spoken language, right?
All right, so I feel justified. That's the claim. And what's the basis of the claim? I give better service. Now, one could say I give better service. That is a premise, but in and of itself, that also is a claim.
Claim, exactly.
Okay, and one needs to unpack that claim in terms of, well, what's the premise
There is no premises in here, so it's not an
that
argument.
claim? Okay, so it goes on and on and on, but you know, it's one sentence, and you need to differentiate between the conclusions and the claims. Only then could you start picking apart the arguments, just
Okay.
like with the abortion example. Once you see the elements of the argument, only then could you start commenting on the truthfulness of the argument, because now you know which part of the argument you need to question, if that makes sense.
So Henry, Zainab had a really good point when we talked about this example, because she said something about like, hey, if this dentist were saying something like, I give better service because, you know, or saying like, hey, my evaluations, my patient evaluations have been stellar over the past 3 years. I've only received 5 out of 5 stars from every patient I've had. So if that person would, you know, support this statement a little bit by something more than just saying, hey, I just, you know, I feel I give better service, but show some evidence for that, that would strengthen the overall claims he's trying to make here. And I thought that was an interesting thought that Zainab had.
Well, yeah, I mean, one has to dig deeper and provide the evidence for the better service, for sure. But now, at least, now you know which part of the argument to question. Once you've dissected out the argument into claims and premises, now you know which one to focus on. Just like, again, the abortion. Now we focus on, okay, what's the evidence for the fetus being a human being? And we get down to the religion, and now we could start questioning, why is the fetus a human being at the point of conception? Or why is the fetus a human being when the fetus gets a soul? What's the evidence for that? And trust me, I don't want to go any further right now with the abortion debate. Okay, so
this sentence is an argument. I don't know.
Which one?
Label number 8.
Yeah, 8 is an argument. Okay. Just for the interest of time, let's I'll put in the on the discussion forum the complete answers to all of this, but what about 10? Is 10 an argument?
We can't see 10 on the screen. Could you scroll there for us, Henry?
Oh, there we go.
Thank you.
We thought it's neither an argument nor an explanation. It was just hanging no from nowhere.
It seems
Well,
like
how
an
is it an
opinion.
argument? Well, the claim is Levi stockings are still in style, but is there any supporting premise for that?
To start with, I'm not even sure what pleats and dockers mean, so I got lost in that statement.
Those are pants. Dockers are a particular type of pant, and pleats are, well, pleats can be pants, but also...
It's a type of pant. It's a type.
It's a type of pant, yeah. But you can also have pleats in a skirt. It's like when the cloth gets folded over each other. I'm going to put a picture in the chat. How about that? I had to look up pleats myself.
That's better.
That would be much better.
Argument because there's no premises
Exactly.
whatsoever for that claim. I mean, there's a claim, but there's no premise. So there's no argument. An argument consists of two parts, premises and claims. Unless you have those two parts, you don't have an argument or a basis for a debate. And the same thing like this one here, the Directory of International Community. It's just a statement.
Yeah, it's a fact, like a fact.
Okay, so it's not an argument. So maybe the best way to think about it is that an argument, I mean, you could have claims in a paragraph, but unless you have premises and claims, you don't have an argument. Let me just end by, I said I would tell you this. Okay, let me end by this and we'll take a break. Two kinds of good arguments. I mentioned before deductive and inductive. Deductive is said to be valid, meaning when you say you have something that's valid, you're in an argument sense, you're saying it's true. Because you deduce from the supporting premises. So let me give an example. Josh is taller than his wife, and his wife is taller than his son. Therefore, John is taller than his son. So this premise supports this conclusion and actually proves the conclusion. Essentially, let's see, what we say that a deductive argument means it isn't possible for the premises to be true and the conclusion false. If the premises are true, the conclusion has to be true.
Yeah.
It isn't possible for the conclusion to be false. So without a doubt, conclusively, the conclusion is the truth. Now, someone could say you measured wrong. That could be true. But if these statements are true, it is not possible for the conclusion to be false. That's the concept of a deductive argument. Now, having said that, we rarely deal with, especially in science, with deductive arguments. It's mainly inductive. Okay. Now, a good inductive argument doesn't prove or demonstrate the conclusion. We say it supports it. Okay. Assuming that the premises are true or probably true raises the probability that the conclusion are true. Getting back to the p-value of 0.05. Okay. Premise: John or Vulture lives in Alaska, therefore he uses mosquito repellent. Now, the fact that he lives in Alaska, where there's a lot of mosquitoes, makes it probable that he uses mosquito repellent. Okay. Again, it's not deductive, it's inductive. You could say, well, here's the claim, and And the premise is that he lives in Alaska. Now, that doesn't make it absolutely true. Another example I like to give for inductive arguments, okay, inference, okay. I look outside the window here, okay, and I'm looking at all of the trees. And all the trees are green. I could infer and say all trees are green. Now, we all know that's not true, but I'm making an inference based on the number of observations. And the strength of my argument is based on my sample size. Now, if you have a good sample size, then you're more likely to have a strong conclusion or a strong argument. But if you have a weak sample size, I look outside the window, all of the trees are green. Obviously, my sample size is not robust, and my conclusion is false, or it's not the truth. And so that's an example of a weak inductive argument because of a lack of a good sample size. And so
Henry, can I add something, just because I added a resource and and it really fits well with the previous slide you had on the Alaska guy. Could you go there for a second? I want to explain the handout I added and how it relates to that. So the handout I added, next one, where's the one with Alaska? Thank you, the Fulcher guy. So I added a handout for everyone around, and I talked about this in the group that I was in earlier, about the concept of hedging. So it comes from the noun hedge, which describes sort of a brush, some sort of growing, like a, can't think of another brush, like a plant, right, that is used to divide, often, especially in England, divide different plots of land, a hedge. So it's really about demarcation lines. And so the verb hedging means that we qualify by certain terms the strength of our claim or argument. And if you look at this example that Henry gave us in the last sentence, Fulcher's living in Alaska makes it more probable that that Fulcher uses mosquito repellent. That is a great example for what we call a hedge, the more probable, rather than saying it's certain he will always use, Fulcher living in Alaska means he'll always use mosquito repellent, or he certainly will use. The more probable is hedging the argument. It's not, some people use it or have criticized it, it's like weakening an argument, but it's not about weakening, it's about modifying. And if you think back of some of the examples we had that Henry gave us that made my head hurt a little bit, but I love what you said earlier, Henry, about knowing the different parts, about making sure where you can criticize an argument or, claims and arguments. But when you think of some of the examples that had a lot of may, likely, possibly, could, those are all of what we call hedges. And hedging, the practice of hedging, is something that is ubiquitous, meaning it's everywhere in scientific writing, and really is the quality of inductive reasoning. Like inductive reasoning needs hedging because we just base our claims on the quality of or the quantity of our observations. Does that make sense, Henry? I thought it would fit in here well. I will talk more about hedging and we look at examples at a later workshop, but I wanted to give you access to a handout on it right now so you can kind of take a look at that, because I think it might help in understanding this idea of a scientific argument.
Right, yeah, so hedging is similar to the section of your discussion section when you discuss the limitations of your conclusions, why your conclusions might not be the absolute truth based on sample size, selection bias, faulty measurements, blah, blah, blah. So here's the landscape. We have deductive and non-deductive or inductive. Deductive, it's either valid, invalid. Inductive, strong or weak. Bad argument, good argument. False premises, bad argument. True premises, good argument. Okay, so essentially, this is where we want to get to. Okay, and we see it could be a somewhat ambiguous pathway to get to a good argument, but our job is to know not only how to make a good argument, but how we know when someone is giving us a bad argument. And that's what we'll learn throughout the next 12 months. Okay. All right, good. So I hope I made your head spin around. So why don't we take a 10-minute break? We'll come back and I don't know, when we go into our breakout rooms to look at our proposals, I'm thinking that I think in terms of faculty, I'll leave it up to you how do you want to work it in your own groups. But I'm just thinking that I guess different people are on different levels of progression and how they're progressing with their proposals. I guess maybe spend more time on people who are maybe questioning their actual proposal, and maybe they want to actually chart a new territory, or maybe people are questioning their objectives, or maybe people are not want more advice about their study design. I think that maybe use the session as to what kind of issues need to be explored in the next few weeks, so that people could move on, if that makes sense. Again, we're not ending today, okay? We're continuing on, and maybe it's time to chart the proper pathway for each person on what is needed, what has to be, what should be accomplished in the next few weeks, because the timetable said July, August to develop the proposal. So what are each person's missing parts? If that makes sense, maybe explore that, and maybe everyone should make a to-do list on what they need to do on their proposal. It could be, it could be, well, I need a new proposal, all the way down to, okay, now I need to figure out my study design, okay? And there's different levels of progression, and which is okay. If you need to start a new proposal, that's fine. It's better to come to that conclusion rather than stick with something that's not going to be productive. Okay. All right. So we'll take a break for 10 minutes. Manuel, you have a question?
Yes, two actually.
Two?
if you allow me, sir.
Oh, well, it's up to your group, but go ahead.
Okay. No, the question are actually directed to you, sir.
Oh,
yes, the first one is a clarification more than a question. If the lectures and the video recording for yesterday was shared, and where, because I tried to look for it, I couldn't find it. I don't know if
did not make the recording yet yesterday.
Oh, okay. Then the second one is, I don't know if it's a bit too early, because since we have another workshop in December and data collection is after December. So I'm wondering, there will be cost implication in data collection. The budget, how is it going to be funded? Is it self-funding, or there will be some funding support for data collection?
The short answer, good question. The short answer is there'll be, depending on the project, well, this gets all incorporated in the issue of feasible. And so I will be looking at your projects, obviously, and if it winds, I hope to provide funding. However, if you propose a proposal that's going to require a lot of resources, I will tell you it's not going to be feasible.
Okay.
Right now, I'm not seeing any proposal that is consuming a lot of resources, so I reserve the right to change my mind.
Okay.
So think about that.
Yeah. That's quite comforting.
All right, good. All right, so why don't we take a break for, well, how much of a break do you want?
You said 10 minutes, sir?
15 minutes, yes. 15.
15 or 20?
15 minutes.
It keeps on increasing. Why don't we do 15 minutes?
Okay, great.
Okay, great.
All right. And we'll come back. Okay, very good. Excellent. Okay, we'll see you soon.